welcome to HR Nightmares. I'm Lisa Leath, and I'm here with Beth Looney and Amy Conway. And today we are going to get on a little bit of a soapbox. Right?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
This episode is all about everything we live and breathe and preach about in our daily lives. And especially as consultants at Leath HR Group, we kind of advertise ourselves as modern HR practitioners and strategic leaders. And we still sort of face the stigma of HR when you kind of look at our TikTok micro clips and the comments that come on it and all the memes that pop out on all these like business TikTok channels or Instagrams. Everything is about like HR, womp womp, like party police, like we don't like to have any fun. We're into disciplining people and following the policy handbook. So what I really want to do today is talk about just the evolution of HR, human resources, which is now becoming everything from people operations to people and culture to, we could still call it HR. It's all the same stuff. Okay. At the end of the day, it's about people and employees and taking care of both the company and the employees. And so we kind of play this like medium role.
Yeah.
But it was about 20 years ago, I think each one of us kind of forayed into HR in different capacities, right? I know I started as an HR generalist at a boutique law firm in Manhattan. You started at Nordstrom.
For 5 years. So I kind of dealt with that, being a people manager first. Then I moved into HR and I was just a coordinator. I did a lot of the onboarding and learning development stuff and intern program and all that good stuff and kind of worked my way up through the system there.
And then what was your first job in HR?
The first one was at the company that we had.
Okay.
So, yeah, kind of
At the
learn
company you
on the
owned.
fly. Yep. I owned a company, an engineering company, and learned on the fly. Took a lot of classes online to try to figure out how to do it. And
Which
sometimes
that's interesting in itself.
it was by fire. And then I went to grad school because I'm like, I really want to get the real deal of how to do it.
Yeah. And so even traditional, and this could be a whole nother episode on its own, is like traditional schooling and how it's not really hitting the nut on like what employers need today. But I mean, even you think back to schooling that we had, we spent so much time. I know at Penn State, we spent a lot of time. It was a great program. It's one of the world-renowned labor employment relations programs. But like, you spent a lot of time talking about laws.
Right.
And
Policies.
not a lot about like situational scenarios. And like, when you talk about humans, there's so much gray. It can never be black and white. You can always refer to a policy or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're using a lot of discretion,
Good decision
right?
making. A lot of
And
discernment.
you're never looking back to like case law. Well, wasn't there like a lead belly or lead better?
Lead better.
Yes.
Yeah, I just remember that from studying for
I
those
mean, you
tests.
certainly
It's
like those things come up when you're dealing with major employee relations, but that's not daily. I mean, it could, depending on the business you're in, it could be happening daily, but those kind of companies that are dealing with that stuff daily also hopefully have employment attorneys. I would never, as an HR person, like be able to muddle through that all on my own. A lot of the things I do on my own are things that are just like, well, what feels like the right thing to do for the humans, and a lot of those just kind of basic day-to-day, this is just a conversation we need to have.
When you guys think about the evolution over the course of your career, so each one of us, about 20 years each in this profession, describe that for me. How has it come? What's good about how it's evolved? What's bad about how it's evolved? How do you describe that?
Well, after I had that job with the engineering company, then I got hired on and I was the HR manager for a manufacturing company. And I think that it has evolved a lot in the fact that it used to be very less people-oriented and less business strategy, a lot more rules, regulations, almost like the HR police, right? So you'd always be, oh, here comes HR. That whole mindset was different.
Yeah, the policy police.
Yeah, and I never felt that they used my business knowledge to help them grow their business,
Yeah.
And I think that now each HR has evolved to that. So we are at the table and we're talking about business strategy, growing, kind of shifting gears of what people are doing and how to have the right people at the table to be able to make those changes.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, here's the deal. I have to acknowledge that I worked for a company that I think I started there in 2002, so I don't know what anything was like prior to that, but I feel incredibly fortunate that I think we always kind of had it right in the way we were set up. When I started as a people manager first, and when difficult conversations had to happen and I didn't know how to have them, I would go marching into my HR manager's office. Hey, do you have time? And she would walk me through what that conversation looked like, make sure I felt comfortable, support me if the conversation didn't go well and maybe she did have to help, or step into the room, or my employee wasn't happy and they want to talk to her. So like that, I think, was the right way all along. And HR had a seat at the table when it came to business decisions. And HR was the right hand of whatever leader they supported. So like I always saw it modeled that way. So what I'll say more than anything is what I struggle with in this role, in a consulting role, is the fact that we help a lot of businesses that didn't have that, being modeled for them through whoever either their HR person was, that we're now kind of filling in that gap and replacing, or maybe they never had it to begin with. And there's business leaders that only knew kind of what I think is pretty old school HR. And I'm kind of constantly fighting that because I just refuse to allow them to utilize me that way. Right. I'm like, no, I have no interest in being the policy police. I have no interest in coaching every single human in this building. I'm one individual. There's 100 individuals in this building, and half of them are people managers. So they need to learn how to have these tough conversations themselves. And I'm here to guide and support them, but I'm not just going to do it for them. Just because that's what you had doesn't mean that was the right way.
Everything would fall on HR, the difficult conversations. So the management didn't necessarily have those, and they would rely on us to go in to have the difficult conversations. And now I think it's shifted the way it should be. And if you had it at Nordstrom, you already had it the right way.
Yeah.
But then we can kind of give aid, support, guidance to the management team. Then they can make those decisions and they can have those conversations, because ultimately it's their group that they're managing, and they need the skills, right?
Yeah. And it was funny. I mean, at Nordstrom, like, the way you really got into HR, at least in the stores, right, in the regions, in HQ, it was a little different, where we had a lot of specialty HR people and talent acquisition, all of that thing. But on the store side, and in the what we would think of as field, really, the way you got into HR was kind of being a great people manager. Right. So that was my kind of like entry in, and the reason why I was chosen to move into that open HR role when it came was because I became really good at coaching people and the people side of managing departments. And
so that's super interesting, because that was also the same at Corning. When you rewind 20 years, my first manager at Corning he was an engineer, and he was just a really great, and it came naturally to him, right? He would somebody was acting a little strange today. He'd be like, come here, let's go grab lunch together. What's going on with you?
Right.
And he became an HR leader and kind of moved up through the ranks. But then slowly that transition, I would say probably 15 years ago, to that being poo-pooed. Instead of being a great people manager, it was to have a pedigree, right? And so I think about I went to school with a HR degree, and that was looked at really favorably, right? I had the education versus it actually probably would have been better if they had thrown me in and forced me to do a rotation for a year as a shift supervisor, and dealt with all the frontline baloney before I start giving people advice on how to deal with these, night shift debaucheries. But no. And so there was a shift there. The other thing that I would say has been noticeably different, and maybe it's changing a little bit, certainly changing on my team at Vanica, but HR used to be a man's career. Employee relations was a man's career when my mother got into
80s,
it. Right? And so in the mid 90s, late 90s, it was all men in the senior leader, human resource and employee relations spots. And then you turn around yesterday, and it's every single HR manager or director role is filled by a woman.
I think I looked it up statistically. It's about 70 to 75%. It's in the 70s of percentage female in the HR career professionals.
So, but you think about why that is. And so you rewind 15 years ago, and the old school HR, and it's people, you're literally pushing paperwork and doing administrative and managing the workers' comp program and the return to work program. It's sort of like these caring, like
or
almost
very
like
black and white activities. Very like, I can
Administrative.
easily hit that,
Filing.
right? Or I can
party
check that.
planning.
There's a resource that it's
a woman is better at party planning.
Oh my gosh. I worked
Okay.
in a place and literally I got called. I was on vacation. I just want to know the status of the Christmas party. I was like, A, I'm on vacation. B, I've had a couple of drinks. No.
See, it's a holiday
It's gonna be a
party
good
because
Christmas
we're
party.
HR.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a holiday party.
Do you know how many times I've had to say, HR are not your party planners?
Yes.
I mean, I've literally had to say that. And finally, there's some things that obviously with our clients, there's only so many resources we have in the building. So sometimes it's like, we've got to wear the hats because who else is going to do it? And I'm like, finally, sometimes I stop fighting and just do it because it's just easier. But I've had to say many times, like, I want to be clear, like going forward, as you continue to grow as a company, like this is not an HR activity. I don't want HR planning social function. Who wants to come to the HR planned social function? Like
nobody.
I mean,
Zero
I don't even want to
attendees.
attend and see what's happening at the social function, let alone should I be planning it.
But sometimes we need to plan it because remember I've told this story before, but the time they had the pool party and there was like all men with a couple of women that were wearing super skimpy bikinis. I'm like, you guys are coworkers, and it was
You're like, who thought that was a great idea?
And it wasn't Sunbum, so that wasn't the company you were. Well, yeah, I think if you think about just like general gender, like the way that we look at gender in our society has evolved a lot too. And so I'm really happy to see men being interested in, and like
coming back into
people with all different
the
backgrounds
career.
being interested in being a people leader, whether you're leading like talent development or org stuff or employee relations or even being a generalist or recruiting. I mean, gosh, I've probably got one of the best recruiters on the Vanica team, and I have a team of all guys right now. It's like
That's really
crazy.
surprising.
It's like totally status quo, slicing you up. But yeah, I think it's really. I'm so interested in seeing the future of our profession evolve into being a little bit more inclusive, and I think it can.
Well, I think it should be a really well thought out career path for business leaders within an organization, right? And I think, again, I go back to my like Nordstrom days of like, in order to be a great HR business partner, you had to understand the business.
Right.
What made me a great HR business partner was that I knew as much about the business as the business leaders knew, right? And I could sit in, and even though not everything was my decision, I could weigh in with really good business acumen. And that is part of the career of HR. And that's why I'm so passionate about, and I get on my soapbox a lot about how HR professionals should be utilized, because it's really underutilizing our abilities when you're not letting us sit in on business topics.
And you mentioned that before, like the company you went to after you owned your own engineering company with the X.
Dun, dun, dun.
But you, they didn't leverage, right? They didn't fully utilize your business acumen. You said one of the pros to you being an HR manager at Nordstrom was that you had some business acumen. I feel that I have great business acumen when I step into like any one of the clients or at Vanica,
Well,
the
because you
startup.
own your own business.
And I own my own business, right? But I'm always like curious. So if you're thinking about getting into HR as a career, you have to be naturally curious to ask a lot of questions and understand what's a day in the life of a production employee, what's a day in the life of the quality manager, what's a day in the life of the kid who writes code over here. You have to be curious. Otherwise, you're not going to understand what programs to even propose, and you're surely not going to understand the return on investment to get that money out of your CFO.
Well, here's a question I've got. Okay, so I kind of went into HR kind of non-traditionally just by owning this company. You went to HR through school.
Yep.
What do you think, and when you're hiring, like you said, you have a great recruiter. So what were you looking at for that? Do you think that we're going to evolve away from maybe the educational attainment and more just the experience in the business world?
I don't know. I think it depends on the situation and like kind of evaluating the job you're trying to fill. So like if you were to let the job speak, which there are actual assessments out there that we have available through Leath HR Group. But there's a job benchmark where you can actually create a behavioral profile on if the job were to tell me, if the job could speak, what would it tell me about the behaviors, the motivators, the competencies of this person? An HR leader at one company could require totally different behaviors than an HR leader at another company. So like, for instance, for me, when I was looking for a recruiter at Vanica, we knew we were going to go from like 60 employees to like 130 employees. And we were no longer sort of like this scrappy little startup, but we were like, no kidding, had a great product market fit. We got a private equity investment and we were like, let's go get those A players. Well, to get A players, you need somebody who can play the game. We just so happen to get an like professional athlete who negotiated his own contract in the MLS and just is a fabulous salesperson. Yeah. And he also has a super high IQ and is able to like conversate. So that's what I needed at that point. But for some companies, we need an entry-level recruiter, someone who can, basically screen the applications. If there's a lot of volume applications, I could think for sure in healthcare, like you need a ton of recruiting coordinators just to get through the volume of people applying. And make sure that we're being timely and responding. But like, that's not real recruiting. So like screening applications and doing phone screens, that's not recruiting.
It's a function of
It's a function of recruiting. Right. Like it's a necessary evil, right? But like, I mean, you're not even going to need recruiting coordinators in the future with AI.
I think there's probably a balance, right? I mean, I think HR is a pretty hard profession, even though I don't know everyone would agree with that, but you have to be great at finance in budgeting, right? You have to understand business, so have good data and analytics abilities. Mm-hmm. You have to understand technology because a lot of times you're either rolling it out or helping everybody else figure out how to use it, right?
Yeah, you have to be seen as the expert.
You have to be have a really high EQ and be able to talk and actively listen and use good decision making. You have to, know risk and legal things. I mean, there are so many dynamics.
Project
and
management.
That each one of those things I just described, and I could go on, are a separate job for other individuals, whereas HR professionals have to be a generalist and know enough about each one of those things to do the day-to-day activities that are required.
You have to be able to talk with the sales leader. You have to be able to talk with the CFO. Yes. You have to be able to talk with the engineering leader, with the production supervisor.
The interns.
And unfortunately, because we're running the intern program.
I just don't think that
but
that
that's
is
the
learned.
Talent pipeline to come in, right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully
I
have
just
an intern
don't
program.
think that that's learned in school. Unfortunately, I do think now people need to be given a shot and they've got to get those entry-level jobs to get the experience. But unfortunately, in HR, I would rather people have some experience in the business than just have a degree in HR, personally.
And then go back more if you're going to be a generalist. So, yeah, I think, like, for instance, I have a non-traditional person in a director of HR role working for me at Vanica. He used to be a principal. Now, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of similarities, right, to being a principal. He's a fabulous HR person. He's got a big career ahead of him, but he's learning because he never got that education in employment law or workers' comp or global compensation or all the things that that we actually got coming up the ranks. He didn't get in his education degree.
But the human side, he has
the human side. Yes. Fabulous, great intuition.
Which I think is probably the harder one to teach.
It is. You can't teach that. You cannot teach that.
That's ingrained in you. Yeah. Either you have it or you don't.
That's who you are intrinsically. And while it can be worked on and developed, if it's not there to begin with,
and you know what you do? You literally get on SHRM's website and start reading. Again, it's about being curious.
Yeah.
One thing that happened this week that was so fun, I work with a small company. All my companies are small. And we are really pushing back on doing the recruiting that the supervisors need to do their own recruiting. Because the person that does HR at this company has been doing all of it. And it's just too much. And she's looking for things that probably they're not looking for, right? That's like old mindset.
Yeah.
So we're switching it. And it was really fun to try to teach somebody what to look for in a resume.
Yeah.
And how to kind of structure the interview and that kind of thing. So
people managers need to have the buy-in.
Teaching these skills, right?
People managers need to really from the minute we start the recruiting process, really, be choosing those candidates and interviewing them along the way. I mean,
But
I
some
had this
people-
conversation this week too, where it was one of those where the people manager didn't understand why they had to tell candidates that they interviewed, or an internal conversation, you know, they thought HR should do that, right? And I'm like, well, when that candidate though has questions about why you didn't choose them,
It's not an.
I can't answer those
old.
questions.
That's old.
I haven't met them. I don't know them. I didn't talk to them. So there's a reason why people managers should be the ones communicating, because it was your choice to not move forward with them as an applicant. And you need to own that choice.
I'm thinking of other things when people are like, hey, this person's not doing well at their job. Can you put them on a performance improvement plan? And I'm like,
I don't know what to
don't
do.
know
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, like
and
I have a process.
I don't
I'll
even
tell you
know
about
what
it.
their
Yeah.
job duties
exactly,
are on a
and I
day-to-day
don't
basis.
know what they've done, but you do.
Let's
you
talk
know.
about it.
Yeah.
Let me help you with that performance
Right.
plan. But
I think this brings up a really great point, and it's that our role, especially as in a leadership HR role, is to really proactively coach people managers on how to be the best leader and manager they can be for their people. And I think that's something that we severely underestimate in business, as it doesn't matter how small, how big, what industry. We severely underestimate the investment and the training and the time we spend as the executive team and the HR leadership team in our people managers. These people need training, and it doesn't matter how long they've been doing it. We change comp review processes. We change the way that we want them to do quarterly reviews or annual. We do change process, and guess what? They have a freaking day job.
Right.
So we just need to repeat ourselves and offer, monthly, quarterly trainings like touch base, drop-in hours, one-on-ones, skip levels with the CEO is something that I just started doing with some of our emerging talents. But we have an obligation now to lead our people managers in sort of a they don't report to us, obviously, right? But it's influence without authority,
right.
and teach them how to be great to their folks. That's a role that maybe we didn't play in the past.
Yeah. Can I bring up, you said it in the very beginning, and I want to go back to it because I have some real opinions here, and it's not shocking. Anyone who knows me knows I have opinions about everything. But I have some real opinions here into the evolving names of HR. You talked about it.
Yeah.
Personnel. Remember that
Okay,
was
yeah,
in
yeah.
the
But
70s?
personnel.
I want to talk
70s.
about these new ones that
People
are
still say
driving
personnel changes.
me
How do you, ugh.
nuts.
Okay, tell me.
Okay.
It's probably my title.
It probably is. The one that
Let it rip, baby.
The one that I is absolutely a pet peeve of mine is people operations.
Oh.
People
Why? See, that doesn't bother
operations.
me. That doesn't bother-
People in operations, those don't even
People
go
ops.
together.
People up.
Right, but people are people and operations is operations. Those are two different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Humans are not operations, or we're not talking about machine. It drives me nuts. I'm
But human resources is also very cold. It's I'm ordering
no, it's the resources,
from AliExpress.
The human, you have all these resources. That's how I think of human resources. I think it was created in the sense of you have all these resources to help you with benefits and the talent acquisition and recruiting and career development stuff. And here's the humans that's the resource, right? So I think about it in that realm of there's a human component to the resources that we have for our people, right? The people operations, I'm sorry, it drives me nuts. It also drives me nuts for companies that actually have operations orgs, right? And I'm well, wait, we have a whole division that's actually just title operations. So now we're the people operations, then you're the operations. So this is very confusing to all of us. Okay, so that one drives me nuts.
That doesn't drive me nuts.
That's my one that I really just
Silly
do not
titles.
like.
Okay,
Though,
people
drive me
operations.
crazy.
Thumbs up or
The
thumbs
other-
down. We
I don't
can all
mind it.
vote. Okay, thumbs up.
down. It's terrible.
Okay.
Okay.
What about the one? Do you remember a long time ago there was one called Camp Counselor, and it was
Oh.
zany. We're
What?
zany. Look at us.
I have never heard
No.
of that.
Double thumbs down.
That's
middle finger up.
Yeah, double thumbs down.
Okay.
Okay, so the new one, and this is what you're probably called, people and culture. People and
Double
culture,
thumbs
right?
down, middle girl.
Sorry,
we're
Good
listening.
Lord.
Yes.
Are you good people and culture?
That's what I call my director. Yeah, who's basically
People
like an
and
HR
culture.
manager anywhere else, right?
Right. Okay, so people and culture. I don't hate it as much as I hate
You're
people
just saying that
operating-
because you're
actually,
sitting in front of me.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
scared what I'll do.
No, I don't care.
You're
but
buying your own drink after
People
this.
and culture, I laugh because I'm replacing myself at one of our clients, and we're hiring is for people and culture, and that's what was wanted. And like, I don't totally dislike that one. But what's hilarious is because you call it that and you post a job called people and culture, I keep getting all these resumes for people who have no HR background, but they're really good at culture. Like they see the culture part of that and think that it's party planning and social coordination and event like I'm getting all these resumes and I'm like,
planned a company
this is really like blurring the lines. I don't think we've transitioned enough to go put this on LinkedIn and like we see this and I'm getting a lot of bad resumes.
I think that people, the definition of culture, I think that might be really like all over the gamut.
It's all over the place. Because so it's a little hard. I don't totally dislike it
but
as
I think
title.
It's because culture is not well defined.
Exactly.
It's very
nebulous.
Like, people can
We're not quite there yet.
Right. Well,
on
depends on
making
the
it a
industry.
mass thing.
Depends on the industry. In tech, every single person at the CHRO level is called Chief People Officer. That's just like a tech thing.
Yeah.
And then
where we were CHRO.
Yeah.
Chief Human Resources
which
Officer.
is still super fine.
Yeah.
But like HR manager, HR director, that's something that people can wrap their minds around.
Just
people
say director.
and culture.
Why can't we just say director of people?
Yeah, we can.
You know what I mean? But why does it have to be people and culture?
I give a thumbs up.
I guess the reason why I don't like the culture piece is because, again, I think that that's putting it all on HR and not on the people managers and the executive leadership. I'm sorry, but creating company culture is not the job of one individual. So that's the only reason I don't love that title, because I think it puts culture all in the hands of HR.
My director of people and culture, I hear it from him once a week. He's like, I'm the only person in this company with culture in my title, and I take it really personally. Because, he's thinking about, and he thinks of big picture things. Like, he's like, hey, I've really noticed that at our volunteer activities or our 360, when we ask people to come into the office and attend in person or bring donations in or, just showing up in general. He's like, I've noticed that the executive team isn't really doing that lately. And like, as the person with culture in their title, that's really damaging our culture. And so it's not like he's not trying to be on the event planning committee, but he is legitimately concerned about
the culture of people.
Culture that we're representing from the top down.
Are you allowing mistakes? Like, that's a culture. Are mistakes okay? Do you make a mistake?
Oh, it's so broad.
Yeah.
It's so broad.
But it is really funny because if you think of culture only as like the social aspect, you're missing the entire point of what culture is in the company.
Culture is our comp philosophies, our best practices. Do we do what we say we're going to do when we say we're going to do it?
Integrity,
like, there's just
right.
all
There's
this,
all...
why isn't he just the director of people? Since you're the chief people officer, couldn't he just be the director of people?
He could be. But
I'm going to call Graham to see what he wants his title to be. And
I'll
see if I can
ask him
help
when
him
I
work
get
on
back.
it.
I'll text him right now.
He's like,
I'm sorry that I did this to you. Are you
He's
okay?
on your bandwagon here.
Okay, well,
So
I give people and culture a thumbs up. Okay,
yeah,
what else?
I'm okay with it. I just think it's like not quite. We haven't like fully baked it out enough that like everyone recognizes it for what it actually is, which is the HR director.
Yeah. I think it matters for the industry.
Think it's wrong. Like, I don't think HR is bad. I don't think we have to recreate a whole title to like shift the cultural dynamic of human resources. I think that shift's been happening for decades. Like you said, it's shifted tremendously over the course of 2 to 3 decades. It will continue to shift. What that shift means is having really good people in those positions who understand what the roles of HR should be and what it looks like to be a business partner, and have business leaders who also understand that and allow those professional people into those great conversations about business.
When the Society of HR Management changes their name to something else, then we can all kind of like get on the new lingo.
The Society of People and Culture.
Amy, you're crazy.
If you're not watching on YouTube, I just rolled my eyes. I'm sorry. The Society of People Operations.
People Culture Operations.
Well, that's
Camp Counselors of America.
I'm gonna get all this hate from all my friends that have had title changes. I'm like, whatever. I'm sorry, but
the titles.
If it wasn't broken, I don't think we need to like reinvent the wheel.
All right, hey, let's any other comments about the evolution of HR and what we're annoyed with? Or what we were looking forward to?
I mean, this week I'm annoyed with so many things. Let's talk about what I did last night. Okay. I told them this before we started recording, but there is this website for HR, which I actually really like, Fairy God Boss. Have you heard it?
No, I get on Evil HR.
Evil HR lady.
Evil HR lady.
Evil HR.
I've got that
Okay,
one.
Fairy God Boss is good. I mean, they have articles and it's a good like resource. It's like the Muse, but people can go in and write all their little questions, right? And it's just anybody, it's like a Reddit for HR kind of thing.
Yeah.
And anyone can answer these questions. They're not HR people or employment lawyers answering these questions. And I rarely respond because I don't like to engage with strangers on the internet. I don't like to engage with strangers face to face, let alone on the internet. So in general, I don't usually respond. But once in a while, I'm like, this is a really good question. It seems like this person either doesn't have good HR or I feel bad that they're so lost. So I try to give my really good professional HR advice. And then somebody commented on my comment. And I was like, you are wrong. And then I kept commenting. But I posted it all anonymously because I don't want to put my name out there. but
You should have said you were Beth Looney.
I would have absolutely killed you. I would have a profile so it kind of knows you can click post anonymous. And so
I would die. I would literally die.
This little troll was writing on all the comments. And it's like, that's against the law. That's illegal. You still have to follow ADA. I'm like, ADA is not just a blanket for all protection of things. Like, based on the size of that business, they may not have to follow any kind of reasonable accommodation. Like, you don't know that. I mean, I was like trolling her trolling, and it was really
How close
bad.
Together in time were the comments?
I don't know. I just went through and I
Was it
anything
like
she had responded to.
1
I
minute
went and
or less,
responded
and
again.
then wow.
Maybe she was having cocktail hour at
So
her house.
I rarely care that much, but I was just having a week, and at 10:30 at night, that felt like the right thing to do when I was supposed to be going to bed for an early morning.
Look for anonymous responder on Fairy Boss or whatever.
But she was wrong, or he or she, I don't know. I think it was a she. She was wrong in giving bad advice, and I had to correct her.
Well, good. Direct people to HR Nightmares write-in so that we can all weigh in and give them great advice.
I'm going to start bringing those questions to our thing.
That
They're
would be
good.
great.
They're good questions. I'm going to start writing in to the people. Visit HR
Visit
Nightmares.
HR Nightmares.
For
Watch
better,
our-
That's
yeah.
for better advice than these strangers on the internet are giving you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you'll be trolled about these women are horrendous to watch and whatever.
Yeah,
They don't know what they're talking about.
We've gotten told we're wrong a few times too, and it takes every bone in my body to not respond. And
I
be
just like it
you're
when Gabby
wrong.
responds.
You think we're wrong?
It's like I don't really.
Oh my God.
So, what are some of our questions for this week?
Okay, so some of our questions are, from Florida. So I'm going to summarize this because it's a little hard to read verbatim. But basically, there's a person at a company that has befriended like the CEO's wife, okay? And basically walks around the office like a hotshot and they can do no wrong. And the person that's writing in has gone to HR and complained like they're basically rude, they're being a bully about things, and it's because they feel empowered and entitled because they have this personal relationship with the CEO and their family. What do they do? Basically, they reported it to HR.
I really
it is
hate
such
that kind
an
of
HR
stuff. Like,
nightmare.
I hate that so much.
Yeah, it is an HR nightmare. I think you just really need to have like a frank, and maybe I don't know what the CEO is like. Like, can you schedule some time with that person?
Does the
She or he?
CEO's wife work for the company?
It didn't
I'm
sound like
confused.
it. It didn't sound like
It's probably
it.
like
that
they're friends.
They
and,
go.
Oh well,
So
I
they
know
go
the
out,
CEO.
right? And they're
I
like
can
in the
do-
know about all the things.
Then
Making
the
a long
CEO
lunch.
needs to kind of get in there and
Yeah.
help direct that a little bit and be like, listen, I understand you have a relationship with my wife and you have a friendship, which I think is perfectly fine, but that doesn't excuse, behavior in the office, right? And
I think
still
you
need
have to be really.
professional.
I think you have to be really careful of that kind of stuff. And if you see any of that idling up, I think it's exactly. It's their responsibility.
Get in there.
But yeah, you can't let that just go because that's talk about culture.
Yeah.
That is one way to just squash every.
Go to your people and culture director and they'll solve the problem.
But in
for
all
you.
honesty, that kind of stuff, I've dealt with some of that, and
Yeah.
it's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
It is.
It is
We've
definitely.
gone to the person like, hey, FY, your spouse, is doing this.
It might be
Yeah.
if you've got an approachable CEO, you should schedule some time with the person and be like, hey, I would think that you'd want to know
Right.
that your personal relationship with this other family, the guy or the woman works here, is people are noticing that and they're talking about it and it's making people uncomfortable. Like, I think you should know.
Yeah, it's
They're
creating
trying to get
conflict
some
of interest here.
favoritism and
Yeah.
It's just coming across as really weird.
And then that
So-
individual needs to be coached as well.
Right.
Yep.
By the CEO, probably, if the HR person doesn't want to do anything. Okay, this is pretty interesting. This is another CEO issue. An employee's mental health provider has sent a request that the employee no longer meet with the CEO in any capacity due to anxiety. Instead, they suggest all requests flow through their manager. We are a small company, and most people at this employee's level have some level of contact with the CEO. She fought to get promoted to her position just a few months ago and has taken time off to deal with her mental health several times since then. How do I handle this accommodation as well as support the employee? I have some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't think that it meets a reasonable accommodation, even if you have medical documentation. It's not a reasonable accommodation, right? Reasonable accommodations because of any kind of disability, which the mental health would fall under there, if qualified for, it is making accommodations so that someone has the ability to do their job that, again, are within reason. So saying that someone just would never have contact with the leader of the organization is probably not going to be a reasonable accommodation.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
So there's my note on the reasonable accommodation. I wonder if that's the same
But
one.
there
from
has to be
last night.
something. You have to wonder too if the CEO has caused such a
Right.
work environment that this
Yes,
person
there's
is
a few layers here.
flipping out.
Well,
know?
I've had plant managers that I've had to coach, and they were responsive to the coaching, thank God. But they would, wake up at 3 a.m. and go get on the computer and look at the GUI, dashboards on the production floor and like pop off emails that people see as soon as they wake up, and then they're like, freaking out. I got to get to the plant. I got to answer this plant manager's questions, and the plant manager didn't really realize that they were causing chaos.
Right.
That they
stress and anxiety.
They thought they were simply just asking a question.
Right. And they were awake at 3 a.m.
Yeah, so I'm going to
hey,
send it.
I'll figure they'll see it when they wake up. It's fine.
So I think a lot of CEOs have just different, literally different schedules. They are not super aware of the times. And Outlook now says do you want to send this? It's 9 p.m.
Or you can also schedule it to be sent.
Right.
Schedule it sent later.
I think there's many leaders, executive leaders, who do not understand that their title alone and their position in the company alone creates stress and anxiety for people that work in the organization. There are many, many people who would not be bothered by that, right? And they're not intimidated, but there's many, many individuals who would be because they already are pleasers. They want to do a great job. They're perfectionists. So the minute the CEO criticizes, it's like they take it so much harder than if it was just their direct manager because of just their position alone.
It's true.
And I work with many that they just don't they think they're in those conversations, and when they go directly get involved, they think they're helping.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're not helping. In fact, you're making it so much worse than if you just let the person's direct manager handle that conversation, because your relationship with that employee is not the same. Right.
That just happened
and so
yesterday.
they don't
That
know.
whole
Yeah.
situation.
The care for there, right? Whereas you think you care a lot about that individual, they don't feel that because you don't have a
And
day-to-day
it backfires
relationship
often.
Yeah.
and rapport
It
with
does.
them in the same way. So you really need to let people closer to them. I had this rule,
true.
as a leader, that my role was when I was a store manager, especially of Nordstrom, right? Because I had 20 managers that worked underneath me, and then all the employees worked underneath them. And I firmly believe that if it was anything in a corrective action or a disciplinary or a redirective coaching conversation, my managers needed to handle that. I talked them through it. I was there to support them, but they needed to do that.
Exactly.
So that I could go in, and my relationship with the employees was to provide inspiration and leadership and guidance and support. And I also wanted to be that open door when they weren't happy with what their manager said, so they had somebody else to go to. But I was like, I can't, A, I don't want to take the power away from my managers. And B, I don't want my people. I know that when it comes from me, it has a really different meaning than when it comes from their manager who they work with every single day. So I understood that. And I think that it's a really good rule to follow.
I think there's probably some coaching that this person needs to do with the CEO, this HR person needs to do with the CEO, to just let them know, hey, the emails at 3 a.m., the getting involved with team meetings that simply don't need to get involved with, you're not being helpful. That feedback's probably good for the person. If we think that this person is like legit, the CEO is legit like causing anxiety and we're considering the accommodation, if you wanted to challenge it, you could ask if you could talk to the provider more. Right.
Yep.
Or you could send the employee to the company doctor, right? And kind of give a preview of like what the job entails, why it's important for the CEO to communicate with every employee or employees in this position.
Or what kind of balance can be there. So to say that you're never going to have to interact, that's probably not reasonable. But are there some other things that are reasonable, right? So there could be some like negotiating there and what that accommodation actually looks like.
Right.
But to go back to that original, like just because a medical provider writes it in doesn't necessarily mean that a company has to meet the reasonable accommodation. Going back to my argument last night with the trolls on the internet because it was about ADA accommodations.
Oh man,
I feel for that HR manager that wrote in.
Yeah,
that is
that's tough
but
situation.
They can figure it out.
Yeah.
All
they
right,
can
guys,
always call us. Right?
Yeah,
call us.
Yep, give Leath HR Group a call. We'd love to get involved more deeply and ask more questions. So if you weren't watching this on YouTube, you're probably listening to it on Spotify or Apple, what do we call it?
Wherever
Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. But seriously, tune in on YouTube. Gabby does a nice job, along with our Signal Fire guys, of editing the shit out of this thing. So
we just need more filtering. No,
sometimes our comments require seeing the facial expression.
Yeah. You should watch this on YouTube. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much. Go back and check out the other episodes that we have, and we'll see you next time on HR Nightmares.
Bye.
Bye.